welcome to today's meeting of the Forensic Services Committee. This is the first meeting of the new year. Should I drop off the call, Chris Cregan will take over to chair the meeting until I'm reconnected. I'd like to also thank Mary Pitt-Caithley for her contribution to the committee, because this is the last meeting of Forensics Committee that Mary will be in attendance at before she retires from the board at the end of March. So Mary, thank you so much for everything, for your contribution and your contribution today in advance. Following his appointment to the board, Andrew Richmond has joined the committee, and May will be his first meeting of the Forensic Services Committee. It's an apology today. So with that, I will maybe make a start. We've got apologies from Brian Johnson and Andrew Richmond. Am I correct in that, Colette? There's no others?
No others that have been notified of, Chair. That's
great. Do we have any declarations of interest from anyone? Any conflicts of interest or that you want to flag up with us? No? Super. Didn't think there would be. And is there going to be any other business that anyone wants to raise that we'll talk about at the end of the meeting? No, not seeing anyone coming forward with that. That moves us then on to item 1.5, which is the decision to take business in private. And this is in accordance with section 20 of the SPA standing orders. And we are asking to take 2 items in private, items 8 and 9. Are we in agreement with that? Okay, that's tacit assent. Grand. That moves us on to the minutes of the Forensics Committee held on the 30th of October, and that's there for approval. Can I ask if members can approve that? Super. And then, bear with me, I'm working off a number of different programs and screens. That moves us on to the action log 2.2. And I think we've got 3 actions there. You bear with me as I try and find this in the papers. Yes, we've got 3 actions. And all of them, I think, are open. None of them are being closed. So, or 2 actions rather. I'm confusing my meetings. We're content with keeping them open. There's explanations. I think they'll all be coming up to the next the next committee meeting. Okay, if we can note those. That moves us then on to the director's report, and we have Fiona Douglas to speak to that. Director, over to you.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Paul. And just before I get into my report, I'd also like to offer my thanks to Mary. Thank you very much for all of your wise counsel and questions on the Forensic Services Committee. We wish you all the best for the future. We will miss you. Thank you. And I'd also like to welcome to our senior team in Forensic Services, Susan Muir, who is going to be covering for Helen Howarth, who's been seconded into our core operating system project. So we welcome Susan to the team, and she's going to be looking after our analysis capability. And you'll hear from her later on in the committee meeting. So moving to my report, I've covered off a number of different areas to summarise our current position and some ongoing initiatives that we have going on within forensic services. So starting with our financial position, we are forecasting a 1.1 million underspend for this financial year, primarily due to lower than anticipated pay costs. Whilst on the face of it, that may appear positive, it highlights a challenge that we've faced during the financial year in recruiting staff at the levels that are anticipated and set out within the budget. This presents a risk to our long-term sustainability, and we are looking at implementing proactive risk-based mechanisms really to enhance our recruitment efforts. Capital expenditure remains on track, and discussions regarding next year's budget allocation based on the Scottish Government's budget settlement for policing, those are underway in the context of that broader policing settlement. I know that we'll come on in the rest of the meeting to discuss drug driving and toxicology demand. However, in my report, I've just summarised that we continue to see that demand for drug driving toxicology continues to exceed agreed levels by around about 23%, which is a trend that has persisted for some time. Also notably, the 2 pilots to roll out the roadside testing to local policing officers in 2 of the subdivisions across Police Scotland under Operation Selton have demonstrated a lower than anticipated demand. Understanding why that's the case will be crucial as we develop the long-term sustainable model for criminal toxicology. That project in itself, again, which we'll come on no doubt to talk about in a couple of areas of the meeting today, is significant, and it is expected to span approximately 4 years based on the planning work that's been undertaken, and will require close collaboration with the authority to ensure appropriate governance as we progress through that. The best value audit, as reported within the period between these forensics committees, which is a key milestone. HMICS and Audit Scotland published the audit, and the findings across policing were very positive. Policing in Scotland is well led, financially well managed, and effective in partnership working. However, there are areas identified for improvement, which includes utilising the self-assessment results to drive improvement, enhancing performance reporting, improving demand forecasting and workforce planning, and continuing for forensic services, particularly to update our strategic business plan, again, which we'll come on to talk about, and in particular we'll report that back into the next Forensic Services Committee meeting. So the recommendations made within the best value audit are constructive and align with work that's already underway across the service. We're pleased today to present our first strategic workforce plan, which was developed in partnership with Skills for Justice. This represents a significant advancement and provides tools to allow us to model demand scenarios and understand the workforce evolution over the medium and long term. Particularly important insight from the plan is the conversion rates, which are set out in the document, which is the proportion of reported crimes that result in forensic requests. A better understanding of this metric will aid in refining our demand forecasts and also our financial planning as we move forward. I'm proud to report that UCAS has recommended, that's the United Kingdom Accreditation Service, has recommended the continuation of our accreditation for the 28th consecutive year. This achievement reflects the professionalism and also the consistency of our scientific and support staff across all of the different laboratories within forensic services. Touching on the staff survey results, the 2025 staff survey overall indicated around about a 3% improvement, with a notable 19% increase in positive perceptions of senior management, which has reflected the enhanced visibility, communication and engagement. Nevertheless, concerns continue regarding dignity and respect within the workforce, including reports of bullying, harassment and discrimination. These issues are unacceptable, and we've established clear priorities for the coming year. We continue to share knowledge with partners across the United Kingdom, including in this reporting period with the Police Service of Northern Ireland and South Wales Police, and we've established constructive links with the new Director of Forensic Science in England and Wales. And as I'd reported back to the board, the main authority meeting in November, I had provided evidence to the House of Lords Science and Technology Committee, reflecting on Scotland's 20-year journey in forensics reform and the strengths of our independent crime scene to court model. The joint Forensic Services and Police Scotland biometric strategy consultation is currently open. And it will remain open until the 1st of March. This strategy is central to achieving the 2030 vision for policing and ensuring the ethical and effective use of emerging biometric technologies. So in conclusion to my report, Forensic Services continues to deliver high quality accredited services whilst addressing significant workforce demand and strategic challenges. The ongoing work, particularly in workforce planning, toxicology development and cultural improvement, positions us well for the future. However, sustained focus and investment will be required. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great, thanks very much. Excuse me, I've got 2 quick observations before I throw it open to members. Firstly, 28 years of accreditation with UCAS. Congratulations on that. I know it's a big deal every year and a lot of effort goes into that, but it's still very gratifying to see to see that maintained. So well done to everyone involved. Second is the staff survey results, and I hear your nuanced presentation of that. I do think the improved perception of senior management is hugely important, and I think that is an incredible improvement, 19% in the perceptions over a year. So well done in all of your team getting out and about, being more visible and more engaged than in the past, perhaps with the staff. And as you say, there's still a way to go with other aspects. So I'd be interested to hear if we can get further updates on that as we go forward over the year, and whatever support you need from us, you'll get it in trying to improve and make people's working days better and more enjoyable for them. So that's those. Do we have any comments or questions from board members? Oh, Angela, and then Chris.
I think Chris was first, Paul.
Oh, Chris, yeah. I don't have an order here, so it's not like Teams, unfortunately. I'll go for Chris, then Angela, then. Thanks.
Thanks, Angela. Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Fiona, for your report. Very, very clear, very helpful as always. I actually wanted to pick up on the second of Paul's 2 points around the staff survey, and would welcome hearing a little more about that. As he says, it's very welcome, the improvement and an achievement for sure. Also, I think we'd all appreciate the candour in your report about unacceptability in certain areas. I think it's really important. Recognising the problem is obviously kind of critical to working with the problem. I'm particularly mindful of, and we're going to go on to discuss the strategic workforce plan, but I'm mindful of the contribution of staff engagement to the efficacy of workforce planning in the long term. So it would be helpful just to hear a little more about your thoughts on how you will draw on insights and so on to sustain the improvement, the welcome improvement that you've referred to in your report. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks.
Thanks, Chris. I think that whilst we welcome the improvement in the staff survey results, I don't think anybody in our senior leadership team is under any illusions as to the work that's still to be done in this area. The strategic workforce plan, I think, is really helpful in terms of looking at and better understanding what the capacity needs to be in terms of the number of people that we need to have, but also really importantly in our scientific workforce, the skills mix that we need to have. We've implemented a new operating model which gives us a lot more flexibility than we had previously. So in terms of multi-skilling and enriching the roles that people can undertake, we've actually got a really good basis, I think, upon which we can now act. And I think we'll start to see that come to life for people. We have gone through a period of transitioning existing staff into a new structure, and that's always a particularly difficult exercise. And it's a lot easier for new staff joining the organisation to be able to better see the career paths which we've now introduced, and to better understand why that flexibility is a good thing. So I think we're working with the existing staff for them to start to see how this might actually practically make a difference in terms of how they feel within the workplace. I think with regards to the bullying, harassment and discrimination, I think one of the key things we need to do is to introduce the tools for our people to be able to challenge both each other and the leadership team. So we're going to be introducing active bystander training, I think, in the first instance, to give that sort of standard tool set to everybody that works in forensic services, so that we can start to challenge any unacceptable behaviours wherever they may persist within the organisation. And I think that that's going to be a key way in which we can start to better understand the lived experiences that staff have, and to provide actual practical ways that we can drive improvement.
Yeah, thanks for that. Are you happy with that, Chris?
Yeah, thanks. And I think that last point around, I mean, obviously in terms of bullying and harassment and so on, leadership is critical, but culture from the ground up is also critical. and it's the relationship between the two that will ultimately help to make progress, and you clearly recognise that. You won't be surprised to hear I will have some further questions in relation to the strategic workforce plan later, so I'll hold my fire until then. But thank you, that's very helpful.
Thanks, Chris. Angela.
Yeah, thank you. And just to continue on that, I've got a couple of different points, but I think the point about change management is so important, and you do recognise it, Fiona. And I wouldn't underestimate the value of the self-assessment process. And that engagement of staff, and you highlight in the report as well that you're engaging staff workshops are underway to inform the revised business plan. So actively feeling involved in shaping the work of the future and understanding it, I think, is a big driver of culture. And under your own leadership and the others, I think that's really important. So I think we're all recognising the change that's underway in forensic services. So well done. I've got a couple of specific questions. There's mention in the report about medium-term financial plan. The best value audit flags the importance of a medium-term financial plan. It's something for Police Scotland as well. I understand the challenges there, but I'm just wondering what work, and that would be associated with your business plan as well, but what work is underway there? And the underspend, and I know we probably could come on to this later on, and if it's more appropriate for you to answer it there, then fine. But I just wondered what steps you were taking to consider other legitimate expenditure that might be incurred this year, given the underspend that you're forecasting.
Thanks, Angela, and I'll take your second question first in relation to the underspend. So we are actively looking at any pressures that we can see on next year's budget and moving them back so that we can deliver that within this year's budget cycle if it's possible. So we are actively looking at that. We're also looking at particularly our mechanisms around recruitment prioritization. I think we have been quite risk averse in relation to how we've approached some of the recruitment decisions, and that has resulted, I think, in this gap between the budgeted establishment and the actual establishment. We have, I think, a real positive in that we've seen a lot of movement within roles within forensic services. So there has been a lot of people that have been promoted or moved between roles as a result of the final stages of the implementation of the operating model. But we tend to go through a cycle of creating sometimes 2, 3, or even 4 consequential vacancies before we are bringing new staff into the organisation, and that extends then that length of time it takes to recruit people. So we're seeing quite a lot of that movement within the workforce, which is in many respects is a very positive thing. But in terms of us reaching that budgeted headcount and making sure that we're sustainable for the future, we've I think more work to do in terms of looking at the approach that we're taking to recruitment, looking at entry level posts and having a different approach to that entry level post recruitment, so that we've got a pipeline almost of staff that are joining us rather than doing these distinctly separate recruitment exercises. And I think that's what we need to look at for the year ahead, because it's so important that we have that strong front line. So we must, I think, be a little bit more bold in terms of our recruitment decision making to make sure that we're always supplying the front line and not creating gaps that we then need to fill. With regards to the medium-term financial planning, I think I really welcome the best value audit and the insights that provides. And I think Forensic Services needs to work closely with Police Scotland colleagues from a strategic planning perspective. And I've certainly had discussions with the Chief Financial Officer in Police Scotland in relation to how we can have this more joined up approach to maximising the value that forensic science can bring, but also understanding Vision 2030 in policing and what the consequences of that may look like in terms of the changing demand for forensic services. The strategic workforce plan is an absolutely critical critical step forward, I think, in allowing us to do some really effective medium-term financial planning, because we can actually see and model now different scenarios of demand from Police Scotland and what that will mean in terms of the workforce in forensic services, not just the numbers, but also that skills mix that sits within it. So I think there's a lot of discussions to happen with Police Scotland colleagues, and those are underway. And we will, I think, be able to have a strong medium-term financial plan that is based on really good evidence because of the work that we've done around the strategic workforce planning, which I think sets us up really, really well to do that exercise in a really effective way.
Okay, thank you. And I do appreciate the challenges and the dependencies that you have on Police Scotland and data coming from them. So, you know, acknowledge that. I think the only other thing is, you know, timescales for these things. It'd be good to pin that down at some point in the not too distant future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right.
Sorry, just on that point of timescales, we will bring forward our strategic business plan to the next Forensic Services Committee. So we will have timescales in relation to this work that's set out in that document.
Thanks. Just bear with me. I'm not seeing any other hands up. So if no other, Mary, Mary, sorry.
Yeah, thank you very much. No, I don't have a question as such, Chair, but I hope you don't mind if I share an observation. I thought Fiona's report was really helpful, but you particularly highlight the recent experience you've had of sharing the learnings from Scotland with colleagues from across the UK and beyond, but also giving evidence to the House of Lords Committee looking at forensic science. And it made me reflect back on my induction when I joined the board originally, and we were given a tour of Gartcosh. And I remember very clearly you expressing the importance of the sterile corridor between forensic services and Police Scotland, and that's always stuck with me. But my reflection is that I suspect you're going to be in great demand, Fiona, over the next few months as forensic reform in England and Wales is taken forward. The experience of the last 20 years of bringing this forward is in Scotland to the model we have now will be really important, I would imagine, for colleagues across the UK. So wish you well with that going forward. I think your expertise and your experience in particular will be very valuable. So yeah, good luck with that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for that, Mary. And if no other member has any questions, Mary, your hand's still up. Just,
sorry.
Otherwise, I'll bring you in performance.
Apologies.
No, we'll move on to performance. So, Vicky, good morning. Over to you.
Good morning and thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. So this report presents the Q3 performance data across forensic services covering October to December 2025, and of course the purpose of which is to provide the committee with assurance on performance across the entire forensic services as an organisation. If I can, first of all, just refer you to slide 3, which is the executive summary. Overall, just to point out that in Q3, there is a period of stable performance, I would determine here, with continued delivery of core forensic services in support of policing, the wider criminal justice system, of course, and our communities of Scotland. This has been delivered with the annual UCAS assessment visit, as Fiona's already mentioned, going on as well across all 5 laboratory sites. In terms of operational performance, demand and capacity remain largely aligned, with strong performance for the most urgent of cases and the most urgent of scene attendances and Crown Office activity. But there remain challenges in terms of police investigative cases and the timeliness of that activity. There is a continued focus, and I'll come on to this later on in my update, around volume crime, DNA and also drugs cases. But importantly, improvements are being seen in these areas, which continue to be actively monitored. An important point for the committee, of course, is that there is internal assurance within forensic services that statutory timelines are being met. And as I say, I'll provide further context later in the update. Health and safety remains a focus for forensic services, with the collaborative working with Police Scotland, our trade union colleagues, and of course, importantly, our staff, is really driving forward positive improvement in that area. And just to note that from a people perspective, and again, I'll come back to this, there has been an increase in short-term absence over the last quarter 3, which, along with UCAS activity and other operational priorities, has had an impact on operational performance overall. If I can now refer members to slides 4 and 5, which look at the balance scorecard and the business plan compliance. Significant progress continues to complete the key activities of the 24 to 26 business plan. And as Fiona has mentioned, a further update on the business plan for the next period will be coming to the next Forensic Services Committee. Moving on then to the performance framework status. So this is included in slides 6 and 7 of the report. This outlines the performance against the performance framework. And again, I would just refer to members later on in the agenda. We have a refreshed Forensic Services performance framework being outlined by Susan today. Again, overall strong performance continues in this area. There has been one change since the previous reporting period, quarter 2, and that is shown on slide 6 and refers to management training. To give a bit of context, we've decided to move this slightly into the amber green area because there has been the implementation of new HR structure within Police Scotland. There have been changes within leadership and the leadership and training space, and also following staff feedback from within the staff survey, it's been recognised that there are opportunities for continuous improvement in this area. We will of course continue to work with Police Scotland to take this work forward. Moving on to slide 8, which covers health and safety. As mentioned, this remains a focus for Forensic Services, and it's pleasing to see the higher near-miss reporting continues again into quarter 3. And I think it's really important to point out that increased near-miss reporting is seen as a positive indicator, where staff should be encouraged and supported to raise near misses before they could potentially result in an accident. Again, of note on this slide is the significant investment in health and safety training for managers and leaders across Forensic Services, which is scheduled to take place in quarter 4. The aim here, of course, is to improve the awareness of the roles and responsibilities of our managers and leaders in terms of health and safety, and resultantly improve the health and safety culture of the organisation. Moving to slides 9 and 10, which show absence information. Of particular note is a spike in short-term absences I've already mentioned. Again, this has been looked at in depth, and it's clear that this is seasonal variation. It's your viral type absence, respiratory illness, etc. It's important to note as well, though, that this year in particular we have seen quite a significant spike. Indeed, it's been about 30% higher than what we've seen in the previous 2 years. Just a reflection of illness across the country as well, not just within Forensic Services. If we then move on to the quality compliance slide, which is slide 11. It's very pleasing to see that positive recommendation for accreditation to be maintained again for the 28th consecutive year. And I personally would like to also add my thanks to all staff across the organisation for their part that they've played in achieving this. It involves everyone across the whole organisation, and importantly, it really provides confidence and assurance both internally and externally for yourselves and our partners on the quality of the work that we do deliver. Moving on to the more operational performance side of the part of the report, in terms of slide 12, which covers scene attendance, there remains strong performance here. In terms of the timeliness, that's how fast our scene examination staff are attending scenes, with that being 91% attended within 24 hours in the last quarter, which is again just above the 90% target. Again, this is actually higher for the more serious incidents and scene attendances. That's crimes of violence, crimes of sexual violence, unexplained deaths as well. Demand remains lower than we've seen in previous years, and work continues with Police Scotland to better understand this picture and the drivers for some of that change there, any risks, any mitigations, and opportunities to ensure that really forensic services are attending the most appropriate scenes and providing the best forensic activity at those scenes. Moving then on to the overview of laboratory delivery, which is slide 13. Capacity and demand remain in balance, with a slight improvement in output being sustained over the last 5 months. So that's shown in the middle graph there on the slide. A decrease in active caseloads, that's the work that's ongoing within forensic services at any given time, has been seen this quarter, which is again a positive indicator. And it's largely due to the increased output for in particular one of our areas, the volume crime DNA casework activity, which again I'll come on to. But of note there, the output in that area has increased significantly from about 1,000 cases in Q2 up to nearing 2,000 cases, 1,880 being reported in Q3. So that's a significant improvement there. In terms of the graph on the right-hand side and also the pie chart, the volume crime DNA activity has influenced those charts. It's pleasing to see that the percentage overdue cases has decreased this quarter, but it's absolutely not where we want it to be. An improvement is absolutely required in this area. In terms of, I suppose, looking at the overall forensic services, a wee bit of context perhaps is important at this point before I move on to the next slides as well. As I've said, Q3 it's been a busy period. There have, on top of that, being an increased level of short-term absence. We've had the significant abstraction around UCAS activity, so that can involve method witnessing, that's professional discussions with the auditors, etc., who are on site. And there's also been significant ongoing policing operations, which have been required extensive scientific and support activity across the organisation. And I think one of the operations that everyone will be aware of, Operation Portalage, the investigation into the gang violence in the east and west of Scotland. Even though that has been over a number of months, particularly over the summer period into September, October, we're still seeing the impacts of that focus on, for example, that large operation on other casework. There's also been quite a number of activities around serious and organised crime and also proactive space in terms of drugs across policing and across our communities. So all of this essentially reduces the available capacity for the more routine casework that we are involved in. Moving on to slide 14 and 15, this looks at performance against the tripartite MOU that Forensic Services, COPFS and Police Scotland have in place. So as seen in slide 14, performance remains strong for the COPFS instructed activity. All delivery requests remain amber, which is really just only 1% below the target there. So I wanted to point that out as well. But the other more urgent cases are delivered green and on target. When we then move on to slide 15, which looks at the Police Scotland instructed cases, this slide I really do feel would benefit from more context. As mentioned previously, most urgent requests for lab examinations and analysis are being met. So you can see that at the top of the chart there for the Police Scotland Priority 1 delivery requests. So that's a really positive place to be. Of note is the significant increase in the number of these urgent requests that we've seen this last quarter, and bear in mind the challenges we've had in terms of available capacity. Those two factors have obviously influenced the performance this quarter. In terms of priority 2 and priority 3 cases, these do remain a challenge to deliver and continue to be actively monitored across forensic services. There hasn't been a significant change at all, and no change since the previous quarter for the priority 2 work, but priority 3 activity, we have seen that there has been a notable decrease in the delivery in relation to that work. A large proportion of the P3 activity is aligned to drugs cases, and while output is improving in this area, compliance has reduced as the oldest cases are being taken forward and completed and reported. Further initiatives are being implemented to drive forward performance improvement in this area and others across the organisation. This also, in terms of drugs, has included additional recruitment of staff, again, aligning with what Fiona has already outlined previously around the recruitment prioritisation activity. But just to note, of course, it will take time for us to really realise the benefits of the new staff once they are onboarded. There's training requirements, etc., required there. Turning to the volume crime DNA aspect, although the status is still classified as red, there has been an increase in compliance there. I think even though the figures are very low there, we're sitting at only 2%, there has been a significant improvement, as I've already mentioned, since the previous quarter. That significant output increase there is really notable. In terms of those cases, the average turnaround time is around 55 days for these, and we will, of course, continue to monitor this area as well. Drugs driving has also been pulled out in the data for the Police Scotland cases, and you can see there that it remains amber, although it is only 2% below the target of 95%. It's sitting at 93%. Slides 16 and 17 then consider our internal assessment of performance at a more disciplined, more granular level here. To point out initially, strong performance continues, as it has done for some significant time in terms of search and recovery scenes, chemistry and documents, drugs driving and criminal toxicology. Moving on to the biology type casework, it's currently sitting at green amber, and we've determined that because there is a bit of a caseload imbalance there across the 4 sites that perform this type of activity, and there's work ongoing to rebalance that. In terms of volume crime DNA, as I previously mentioned, performance is not where it needs to be and where we want that to be. And we are currently having challenges meeting the 21-day target. An internal assessment remains red for this area of the business, which means that there's issues in need of attention. It's important to highlight, though, that activity during the quarter 1, quarter 3, which we've seen in this report and the previous one, are delivering positive benefits in this area with that increased output. And it's forecast that further improvement will be seen moving into the next financial year, into quarter 1, quarter 2. In terms of drugs, as I mentioned before, this has been as an area of challenge and has been assessed as amber internally by forensic services, but it's important to note that the risk of statutory time limits not being met is actively monitored here and other areas of the organisation, and the risk is assessed as low. Moving to fingerprints, the performance has dipped in quarter 2 and quarter 3, but it's really pleasing to see that already in January, as things have become a bit more stable in that area, that there is a likely return to green to be seen early in next financial year, so by into quarter 1. Post-mortem toxicology remains amber, as it has done for some quarters this whole financial year. Ongoing organisational change is really the biggest thing that's impacting this area at this point, and that coupled with sickness absence, and again, UCAS assessments in quarter 3 has resulted in that amber assessment. Importantly, most important work is prioritised. There's great collaboration and partnership working with COPFS and the pathologists across the country to ensure that the right cases are prioritised effectively. And it's forecast that there will be improvement in that area seen in Q1 to Q2 of next financial year. Then moving on to lastly on this slide, firearms, it again remains amber, with ongoing recruitment and training being taken forward to improve performance in this area. As I've already mentioned in previous examples, in other disciplines, urgent work has been prioritised and the demand is being met. So in summary then, the overall performance I would classify remains good, with core services being delivered, supported with by a positive UCAS visit this quarter. It's clear that Q3 has been a very busy period, as I've already outlined, both in terms of operational priorities, UCAS work and decreased staffing levels. There continues to be areas of the business where improvement in performance is necessary, and that work continues, and they require to be continuously closely monitored through internal governance arrangements. Many of the initiatives that are ongoing, such as the recruitment, will take time to embed, and it will take time for us to realise those benefits. But it's important to make members aware that they are obviously essential to ensure that forensic services remains fit for purpose and resilient for the future, as Fiona's already outlined in her update. And finally, I would just like to acknowledge the ongoing commitment of staff across the organisation for the work they deliver for our partners and the public of Scotland. And I'll pause there and happy to take any questions.
Great. Before I throw it open to other members, I'll maybe kick off with 2 or 3 myself, and thanks for the presentation, Vicky. Just going back to slide 13, and bear with me as I find it. I'm pleased to see the improvement of overdue cases down from 48 to 43%. But in your remarks, you said that demand and capacity are in balance. And if that's the case, why do we still have 43% of cases overdue? And when will we be able to see further improvement?
Okay. Thanks, Paul, for that question. I think overall, we do have the capacity in the organisation to deliver against the demands. The challenge that we've always had, and was one of the key factors outlined as a benefit in the operating model, was to really focus in on how quickly we can improve in that timeliness. As I said, and towards the concluding remarks there in my update, I do see that there's some of the initiatives that are going to take a lot of time to embed, particularly as we are introducing new staff and new roles into the organisation. The complexity of some of the activity that we are seeing, particularly in that drugs area, that drug space, is something that we as an organisation really need to work closely with and determine what the next important steps are in that area. And that absolutely aligns back to the strategic workforce planning activity, and I'm sure we'll cover that later on in the agenda. So in terms of answering your question, yes, we absolutely want to improve this area. We will continue to look at continuous improvement opportunities internally, but I think it will take some time before we are in a much more positive position around that timeliness aspect.
Okay, thanks for that. The next question I've got is on slide 15. Yeah, 15. And I'm just curious, because we've got the percentage and we've got numbers underneath. What are the numbers underneath? Are they the actual number of cases?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so I was just at first glance, the 94% going down to 84%. That's quite a substantial dip. But I see that that's about 15% more cases that you've processed. So it's a difficult one. What's confusing me, though, is the 57% going down to 36%, which I would be very alarmed at, because that's nearly a 20% diminution in performance. But I don't understand how that's 1,500 cases you did, and 36% is 1,700 cases. So what's the story there? That's significantly more cases, but almost, well, not quite half the performance, but about 40%. Is there that much more in the system?
In terms of the priority 3 activity, as I said, the majority of that activity is around drugs cases. We are meeting our statutory time limits in this area, but I think in terms of the complexity of some of the work in drugs that we are seeing, as an example, each year we are seeing a significant increase in the number of new drugs that are being identified, and so that reflects what is going on in terms of the drugs situation within our communities. The identification of new drugs takes time. That involves method development, that involves interpretation of the legislation and the Misuse of Drugs Act, for example. And we're seeing that there's quite large seizures of drugs being inputted into forensic services and activity being performed there. So sometimes the reflection of a case, for example, maybe 1 or 2 productions, 1 or 2 simple activities. But what we're seeing in the drugs side of things is that there is an increase in the number of productions, thereby the increase in the number of the amount of activity in that area. So that's definitely been something that we've seen over the last year or so. New drugs are continuously being identified, as I've mentioned. In terms of, I agree, Paul, that the decrease from 57% being amber in the previous quarter 2 to 36% in quarter 3 was or is a concern for us. One of the activities that it's important to again, I suppose, outline is that in terms of when we have overdue cases, they're already overdue, they're already red, if you like, and they can't then become green. So what we're doing is, in terms of the processing and the analysis and reporting of this type of casework, we're closing off old cases, which means that, again, we're not moving them into the green area. They're already red, if you like, when they're reported, which then means we'll have a lag in terms of when we'll see improvement in compliance.
I'm not sure I understand. Where I'm coming from is we've got 20% roughly fewer cases being done on time. And we've got, so it's 20% fewer of the 100%, but we have a significantly, or a small number more cases. So I'm not sure I understand what's happening here.
I think apologies for that, Chair. As I've mentioned, and there's the activity I've talked about in terms of backlog recovery and analysis of activity that's already in the workflow. But coupled with that, we have had significant abstractions because of the UCAS activity and other operational priorities. So if we are using our finite resource for the most urgent cases, etc., that means that the priority 3 are delayed further.
Right. So is the 36% of the 1,750, or is the 36%, or is the 1,750 36% of the total?
The total number of cases are the 1,750, and 30%, 36% of those have been completed on time. So
going to the one below, because you said 2%, I think you described it as a significant improvement. Is a 2% is a significant improvement on what? On 1%, because that's still 98% not being done on time.
I agree. I think the key thing here is the output has improved significantly.
Right. Okay, so 2% of 1,800 rather than the 1% of 1,000 before. So, okay, thanks for that. Right, I'm going to bring in Catherine. Or Fiona, do you want to come in first?
Just very briefly to assist. I think in the areas that Vicky's been talking through, we have been in a recovery position, so we've had a backlog of work. So I guess the summary in terms of what the data is telling you is it gets worse before it gets better.
Yeah.
Whilst we are still seeing a performance which isn't at the levels that we would want it to be, and the difference between 1% and 2% is negligible in the scheme of things, it's still not anywhere near where it needs to be. However, we have seen a significant increase in the amount of work that's being done, but because that work is aged as it's sat as part of a backlog, it gets worse before we'll start to see the improvement.
Yeah. No, okay, Katharina, thanks for that. Katharina.
Thank you very much for that, and thank you, Vicky, for the report. And it's good to see sort of some improvements in performance. I think overall, what you're describing is a strong picture. I was also interested in the data on slide 15 that we've just kind of covered, and I think some of Paul's questioning was going to some of my questions as well. I think I suppose what was going through my head now, also listening to this exchange, is there's two things. So first is exactly kind of this getting worse before getting better. I'm thinking if maybe there is just, and I appreciate that this is the format in which we see performance, but maybe if there is a better way of just showing that picture, that actually, yes, there is improvements, although the overall picture doesn't look like it has improved. So part of it is maybe just presentation of data around this. And the other element that's kind of going through my head is, we have seen these figures, we've seen these kind of red amber areas now for a number of reporting periods. And what is going through my head is kind of like forward-looking piece. So I know that a lot of activity is happening. I know the organization is enhancing capacity, is restructuring, etc., to be able to do more and to shift those red and amber green areas. The question mark I have in my head is how long do you expect to take to get us into something that looks a little bit more different? So it's a forward-looking piece, kind of path to green, I suppose, so because we've been seeing the same colors over and over and over. We know stuff is happening, but it's more that for us now at this stage, it's about being able to assure us that over a reasonable period of time, given all of the activity and the measures and investment that's going in, that over a reasonable period of time, there will be that shift. So at the moment, we keep looking kind of retrospectively, and I was just wondering if there is a way to kind of do a bit more of a forecasting into the future so that we can see, okay, we are indeed on track. So that forward-looking rather than retrospective kind of looking element there, because I think that would go a long way of us having that confidence that, you are on the right track. Because, the longer we keep looking back, the more we'll have to have exactly the same explanation that, it's getting worse whilst it's, it's going to look worse whilst it is getting better. So sort of, I don't know what can be done kind of in the space, but I think from an assurance perspective, it would be quite good to do something like that.
Great, thank you for the question. See if Fiona's put her hand up. Do you want to come in first?
Yeah, do you want to come in, Fiona?
Yeah, if I could, I think that the type of work that we're talking about in this space is generally the faster work that we do. So it's DNA intelligence type related work. So whilst the performance looks poor, and I agree with your points, Katharina, in terms of presentation of data, the context of what we're talking about in terms of impact is that we're turning cases around in a few more weeks as opposed to it being a few more months. And I think that context is particularly important because these are areas where we want to, and the operating model set out to want to provide Police Scotland with intelligence faster. Because it's particularly important in this type of work. Unfortunately, we didn't secure all of the investment that we sought within the operating model project. And we're seeing the consequence of that within this type of work that we're talking about, because as Vicky articulated in the presentation, there is a lot of high priority activity that's going on across forensic services over this period of time. And you can see the strength of the performance. And we see that within the feedback that we receive in terms of the value value that forensic science offers in these really complex investigations. But this is the consequence of that in this lower priority type work, where actually we strive to move that priority up the list because we can see the value, particularly around undetected acquisitive crime, of where forensic science can actually make a huge contribution. But we don't have the resource within forensic services to be able to deliver that at this moment in time. And I think we have a huge program of internal development work to improve efficiency, and there is a lot of work ongoing with Police Scotland colleagues, and there's a number of initiatives in terms of direct submissions of work in this space. So actually, when you look at the system, the ACC and I often have discussions in the Forensic Performance Improvement Group around looking at the system, and actually if we could articulate the data in terms of not just the silo of where it sits within forensic services, but actually the improvement that we're deriving across the system, I think we would see more improvement. So I think, Katarina, as much as we could put context around it, I think we need to present the data in a different way to be able to articulate that better.
Thank you. And may I just come in, Paul? Sorry, just thank you. And this is Fiona. I think what I've heard today, and generally I hear every Forensic Services Committee, I have full confidence that you allocate the scarce resources that you have towards the cases of the utmost priority. So I absolutely understand that you're constantly juggling and around, like, the things that are a genuine priority will get prioritized. So I don't think there is kind of any question around this. It's just we might just need to adjust the expectations for the remainder, everything being equal. If the resources are being equal, we might just need to start moving to some slightly more nuanced kind of presentation of this, just so that, we're not kind of kidding ourselves and constantly keep going over the same thing and challenging on the same things when, in fact, what you're doing is you're living within your means and you're prioritizing your resources effectively. And the rest is a consequence of, despite best efforts and trying to become more efficient, but there still will always be that limit, past which you can't go. So thank you.
Great. Vicky, you wanted to come in at this point, and then I'll move on to Chris.
Yes, if I could. Yeah, thanks for the feedback, Katarina, and absolutely will take on board about the presentation to give a bit more context in around this slide 415 in particular. And also just wanted to point out that we have an MOU refresh scheduled for the coming months, and working very closely, of course, with our Police Scotland and COPFS colleagues. So I think that's an opportunity to have discussions in that vein, as you've pointed out. Thank you.
Super. Chris, and then I'll move to Angela.
Thanks very much, Chair, and thanks, Vicky, for the report. I'm just going to go somewhere briefly different, which is around slides 8 and 9. So, and I don't want to detain us on this for long because you're clearly on it, but just in terms of the short-term absence spike, I'm not surprised to see that, given what I hear in and around me every day. I'd be interested to know whether or not that's continued through, or that is continuing through January. But I guess I'm just landing on it because, going back to the previous point around engagement and so on. I mean, we know that even in the context of an explicable spike like this of short-term absence, the management of absence is obviously critical in terms of engagement. And so I'm just picking it up in that sense. You're clearly aware of it. You've highlighted in the executive summary. So any comment you have on that would be helpful. And just on the health and safety improvements and the benefits in terms of staff engagement there, anything else that you wanted to say about the improvement work in that area, I would welcome. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Chris, for the questions. Firstly, looking at the absence, yes, we have seen an improvement in January in terms of our short-term sickness absence. So there is improvement there, and I think it's really important that we recognise that there are always going to be seasonal fluctuations. The important thing is that we have the data behind all of that and at a much more granular level within teams, etc., and capabilities, so that we can be proactive in that space. And absolutely picking up on your point around engagement with our people is so vital in this area. It's important that our managers are having regular discussions with people who may be absent from work for whatever reason, and also that there's return to work interviews, support. We follow the attendance management procedures as outlined for SPA and Forensic Services and Police Scotland, and we take that all on board. So that's one of the key aspects of the role of managers across the organisation. In terms of the health and safety improvement activity, again, staff have been heavily involved in this area. We have a health and safety governance structure throughout Forensic Services, covering all sites, all capabilities. But we've also introduced last year now the role of health and safety champions. We've got people who have been identified as wanting to lead and have volunteered and are taking forward key pieces of activity in that health and safety space. That's been managed effectively internally. A lot of activity there. And again, as you say, if you have people on board in terms of health and safety, they feel supported and they feel they can raise issues, that's always a positive one.
Thanks for that. Angela.
Thank you, and thanks for the report, Vicky. Can I just say that it's really welcomed and the transparency is to be commended. And the reassurance that I take from it is that performance is something that is taken seriously and it's used to shape how people work and your workloads and so on. So I know that there are issues, that's why we've got leaders in the organisation, but I think as others had said, we can take a lot of assurance from the transparency that's here. My question was on a different, it was slide 12 on scene investigations, and this has been something that's been flagged up previously. So I just wondered about what you feel is driving this and whether there's further analysis between Forensics and Police Scotland that could or should be done in this. And I'm particularly thinking that, you know, not all scenes will require forensics, but there will be a protocol, I'm assuming, that determines when it's most appropriate for, you know, effectively trained people to go out and collect the whatever it is, whatever it is that they collect. But there'll be other occasions where it is entirely appropriate for police to do that. So what training is expected for police officers to go through, and do forensics go through that with them? Are you involved in that at all? And I suppose a further thought I had about this was, do we have any idea of failed cases, I'll call it that, but cases that do not proceed as they could have done because of a poor collection at a scene and it wasn't undertaken by forensics?
Thanks, Angela. Interesting questions there in terms of the search and recovery scenes part of the business. You're right, we do have processes and systems in place which give an outline as to what type of activity, what type of scenes we may attend and we may not be required to attend. So that's all in place. It's very much a collaborative way of working. Yes, there is the sterile corridor, but Police Scotland, of course, work very, very closely with Forensic Services to ensure that it's the right people with the right skills attending the right scenes. From my point of view, science, we've said this for many years within Forensic Services, science starts at the scene. So it's very important that if we are recovering forensic evidence, that we recover that, we record it, we enhance the potential forensic evidence at the scene in the right way with the right systems and methods used. So that's vital for us. There are some activity that Police Scotland absolutely will perform, such as recovery of individual productions and items from that scene. But where it's more complex and there is a need to, as I say, enhance, for example, fingerprints or footwear marks, tyre marks, etc., recover those, or interpret, for example, some blood at a scene, then that's really a role, obviously, for the forensic practitioners and our experts within Forensic Services. Alice has been doing a lot of work in this area with Police Scotland and the ACC's team in particular around how can we look at what to make that even better. So that's including, for example, ensuring that there are awareness sessions at the various throughout a police officer's career, for example, at probationary level, within the CID environment, etc. So those activities are going on, as I say. In terms of failed cases, that's an interesting point. But what I would say is that as an organisation, forensic services have the evidence presented to them, they have the production submitted to them, and it's up to forensic services to interpret and analyse those productions appropriately. There are always some instances where I think there's room for improvement. And again, I think really working together collaboratively is where we can help identify those and look at how we can absolutely take forward learning. Again, as I said, Alistair Patience has been working very closely with the ACC and others to take on this activity.
Great, Fiona.
Yeah, if I could just come in on the back of that, I think we have had a lot of discussions with Police Scotland just around making sure that we keep the training for police officers up to date. So where we see any areas where, for a variety of reasons, there is more activity, perhaps more than should be undertaken by outside of forensic services staff. And this is an area where there is a lot of regulation and standards around scene examination type activity, the use of professional judgment. We train our scene examiners very carefully to make sure that they can understand a scene, interpret a scene, and collect appropriate evidence in an appropriate way that then maximizes the integrity of that comes into the laboratory. So it's something that we need to continue to work on. I think with the advent of new technology, then there's always a risk that you see some sort of creep in terms of practice. So we need to make sure that we keep the forensic elements of probation training up to date as techniques change within forensic services and forensic science more broadly, as well as also making sure that we've got good inputs into crime scene manager training, and also more from an investigatory perspective within Police Scotland's own training programs, that we've got a good forensic awareness that sits within that. So it's an ongoing process, and we're always working to make that to improve that and to make it fit for purpose where we are just now. So there is a lot of work going on in that area, and we've had a number of active discussions with Police Scotland around that.
Great, thanks very much for that. I'm going to move the business on. I'm conscious we're slightly behind, but we'll pick up the pace now. So thank you very much for that, Vicky, and to members for their contribution and their scrutiny of this. So if we can note this, and then I'll move on to the next item, which is the performance framework update. And we've got Susan Ewer. Susan, welcome to the committee. And you're speaking to this report. So over to you.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everyone. I'd like to take this opportunity to present our refreshed Forensic Services Performance Framework 2026 to 27 for approval. The framework has been provided, and given its length and level of detail, I'll take the document as read whilst providing an overview this morning. So in May 2025, our Forensic Strategy 25 to 30, Scientific Excellence for Safer Communities, was approved by the Scottish Police Authority. This refreshed strategy focuses on the consolidation of our new operating model by embedding benefits of our new and more flexible ways of working. To support the delivery of this strategy and our associated business plan, the Forensic Services Performance Review, previously approved in February 2025, has been updated. This update has consisted of amendments to reflect our new strategy and our continued commitment to support delivery of our of our strategic outcomes through effective performance management. Now, an effective approach to performance management is important to the success of our organisation, as it ensures we remain focused on what is important to the Scottish public through collaboration with our partners, and to continue delivering a high quality, timely, fit for purpose and value for money service. The Forensic Services Performance Framework it provides information to support the assurance and scrutiny across forensic services, including evidence of effective risk mitigations. The refreshed framework outlines the key internal processes through which forensic services sets, delivers, monitors and reports on its priorities. It encompasses elements of strategy, business planning, financial planning, performance, people and risk management. Each of these aspects has a governance structure to provide assurance in reporting and accountability within its alignment to a specified strategic outcome. The refresh has added an additional focus on trend analysis in areas including people metrics, enhancing our ability to track improvements and highlight areas where further improvement support may be required. So this outcome-focused approach, utilising the available targeted metrics, increases both our internal and external transparency. So I'm happy to pause there and take any questions. Thank you.
Great, thanks for that, Susan. I'm going to kick off with one, which is reference to search and recovery and scene attendance seems to have been removed from outcome 2. What's the story with that?
So we have changed the focus, as I've said there, onto a more targeted trending outcome, and we have seen improvements in our search and recovery scene attendance area. So we will be obviously still focused on these improvements, but we have taken the metric out of our performance framework just to provide a more focused approach on that strategic outcome.
Okay, and but will we still have that reported to us at committee?
Absolutely, it will still be within the performance report that is provided by the Chief Operating Officer.
Super. Questions from other members on this? Chris.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks very much for the report. I just wondered if you could say a little more about the addition of the metrics in relation to disciplinary grievance and capability. It would be helpful to hear more about that. Thank you.
Yes, that's a really good question. Thank you. So we have added these in. These metrics were and have been within our people plan, but we've added them into the performance framework to aid that internal transparency that I discussed previously. We've feedback from our staff survey around interest in how we are supporting staff to within that strategic outcome and aiding them to work with and within our core operating values. And to do that, we do use the grievance, disciplinary and capability processes. So we won't be detailing individual cases, but we will be detailing the numbers of cases that we will are supporting staff through in these processes. And again, it's around that transparency to staff and external agencies around how we're using these processes to support staff to aid them to work within our organisational values.
Happy with that, Chris?
I can see Vicky's got her hand up, Chair.
Yeah, I'll get Vicky in just now.
Thanks, Chair. And just to supplement Susan's input there, I think in terms of that grievance, employee relations matters, for example, or in grievances, disciplinaries, I think it's important that we focus more, as Susan's already said, about the trends, but also around what themes are coming out of activities and processes such as those, and also the lessons learned, but absolutely taking Susan's point around the confidentiality aspect. So it's really about learning, have been more of a learning culture, and ensuring that we monitor the timeliness of completion of some of these activities, because that's really important for everybody involved.
Thanks, Vicky. That was going to be my follow-up question around themes and trends and lessons. So you've anticipated it. I appreciate it. The rationale makes sense. Thank you.
Super. Thanks, Chris. Angela.
Thank you. On a different topic, page 19, I really welcomed the section on new innovations and technology. And it refers to the importance of the capital plan and using new technologies and so on. I just wondered how recently the capital plan was updated in this respect.
So we update our CapEx plan very frequently, and it works on a 5-year basis, but every year it is updated. And we've talked today already around the current underspend and how we are trying to recover that by bringing items that were on the CapEx plan for next year, well, this financial year, into bringing it forward so that we can utilise our CapEx money effectively. So it is routinely monitored and amended to ensure that we are making the best use of financial funds and providing that best value.
Thanks, Susan. And just in terms of that, because I mean, the technology must be changing all the time, particularly in your arena. How does the organisation create the capacity to do that horizon scan and see what's out there and where, you know, there might be emerging technologies that could really benefit the operation of the service?
Our forensic leads are really that priority in terms of this work. So that's within their role profile, and they are tasked to, they are our technical experts within their specific areas, and they are tasked with the horizon scanning work to ensure that we are aware of the new technologies and how they can be best implemented within the organisation. So that's part of their role.
Thank you.
Fiona, and then I'll move the business on.
Yeah, if I could just come in on that point, Angela, I think it's a really insightful comment in that this is a challenge, I think, across what is an operational forensic science organisation to find capacity to be able to adapt to new technologies. And that's why it's so important that we work collaboratively across academia with other organisations as well, to look at not only what new technology is coming, but to also make sure that we can maximise the capacity that is available to support some of that, particularly around undergraduates, postgraduates, to come into the organisation and to work with us to deliver some of this new technology. I'm also working with my colleagues in Ireland, Northern Ireland and England and Wales to look at how we can maximise innovation and new technology across the different jurisdictions across the United Kingdom, so that we can look at making sure that there isn't duplication and that we can better share practice and learning and also development activity across the different jurisdictions, rather than us all going through the same activity around new technology. It doesn't negate the need for the capital investment, which is always going to be required in terms of purchase of instrumentation, but in terms of that capacity that's required, I think it's really important that across the forensic science community that we all work more collaboratively together for the needs of forensic science across the whole of the United Kingdom, not just Scotland.
Thank you, that's helpful.
Thanks very much for that. Okay, if we can agree this, are we asked to agree this? I think we are. Bear with me as I find the recommendations. It's a new format, so it's like finding a needle in a haystack, the recommendations.
Members have been asked to approve it on this occasion.
Yes, I see it now. It's at the beginning of the report. So yes, we're requested to discuss the content of the report and to approve it. Sorry, I'm just getting used to this, Colette. So you'll be tearing your hair out by the time we get to the end of the meeting. Super. If we can approve this, and then we'll move on to drug driving. And Paul Stewart, you're introducing this, I believe.
I am, Chair. Thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity to present. So, Drug Driving Committee members will be well aware of this paper. It's a recurring theme in terms of the agenda and something that has been monitored over the last couple of years or so. So as per the previous updates, we're seeing a steady increase in demand, approximately 20% annually, but in an ongoing capacity, we are seeing that increase in steady demand. The Q2 average was 325, and Q3 that has risen to 339 cases across the quarter. So we are still seeing that that demand continually on that steady increase. So the committee will be aware that the additional cases that we receive above our internal capacity are outsourced on an ongoing basis with our outsourcing provision. So our outsourcing relationships remain strong, and the performance is in the main meeting our agreed parameters on the 56-day turnaround. So we don't have any concerns about the particular relationships there or the performance with our outsourcing partner. So and we continue to engage with them on an ongoing basis to ensure we have the required relationships there to capture anything that may come along in that space. So our MOU performance, committee members will again be familiar with the 6-month MOU that was put in place, and that performance also remains strong, with all partners contributing to that continuous examination of our performance. That's done through the op pitch meeting on a monthly basis, and where challenges exist in any of the areas of performance, it's identified early, and we are engaging across our COPFS, Police Scotland and Forensic Services as required, and that allows for particularly close monitoring of any cases that may result in time bar. The performance, as I've mentioned, remains strong. We do have some outliers that we continue to monitor. However, with the numbers being so small, I'm really pleased with the efforts of the teams across the organisations, but in particular the criminal toxicology team within Forensic Services, who have achieved 97.6% performance against a 95% target across the quarter. So I'm really pleased with that level of performance. Chair, I'm not going to say much more than that. The report is there for members. Clearly there may well be some discussion. Happy to delve into any areas that anyone wishes to discuss. But overall, I'm fairly content with where we're at with drug driving. There are some challenges in the horizon around long-term sustainable models and the continued increasing demand and upsell turn and all of the things that are in that space. But I think we have the wraparound, the overlay and the governance in place to monitor that on an ongoing basis from a business as usual case point of view. So I'll pause there, Chair.
Great. Before I bring in members, maybe is ACC Johnson, do you want to add anything to that?
Probably, yeah. It's something we monitored during the Forensic Performance Improvement Group, and Fiona and I and colleagues on this call from forensics, and I know roads policing colleagues. I suppose I have a genuine concern about the long-term future. I think when the Scottish Government supported us in going forward with a pilot around drug wipes, I think that was wise, because there was, I think, an intelligence case to suggest that people were driving in Scotland under the influence of drugs and the development of the technology. I think one of the real challenges is we're now being asked to look at something where the only analogy I can give you is we've lifted the lid off Pandora's box. We know this activity is taking place. We know there's a risk to road users and citizens right across Scotland, but the funding hasn't matched the evidence that's come out of the pilot or the business cases presented by SPA Forensics and indeed Police Scotland. And I think we're going to have to work really hard, as are probably Fiona and the team, that if we've got to try and find the additional capacity from within our existing structures, that comes at the cost of quite a lot of other significant activity across forensics and particularly operational policing. So I think the report, we really welcome it. It shows the nature of it. We've obviously got some work to do in the pilots. But I think we're starting to see some of that operational strain, that this is pulling officers betwixt probably equal level, if not higher level priorities. And similarly for forensics, without the funding for the scientific capability, the funding for the processing of that capability, we're going to be trying to push something into a system that isn't ready for it. And similarly, we haven't got the resources to do everything that we would need to do in order to enforce the law in an appropriate way that we would want to do it. So it's a really good report. It tells it as it is. But I think the bigger story is this is something that needs significant support from Scottish Government in terms of financial investment to be able to deal with the growth for SPA forensics and for Police Scotland. And until that growth comes, it can only come at the expense of other areas of operational activity for forensics and for ourselves. I hate to sound negative because I think the technology, the science, it's all proven. The volume is something that could undercut a great piece of work. Sorry, Paul, I don't mean to sound negative, but this is something that if the HMI was on the call now, Craig Naylor saw this introduced in England and Wales and saw the exponential growth. We entered a pilot in Scotland where our gut instinct was telling us we've got a problem, and now we have the evidence to suggest that problem is very real. And now we just lack, if you like, the funding and resource to really get stuck into this into a way that I would want to operationally.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all want anyone under the influence off the roads. And the best way of doing that is the certainty of being caught. So, yeah, I'm going to, thanks very much for that, Steve. I'm going to throw this open to members. Does anyone have any comments or questions on this? Angela.
Thank you, and thank you for the paper. It is, it's a really useful update. I suppose it was in light of the budget decision that for the capital investment that we had requested wasn't granted, and we can understand, you know, the pressures that there are for other sectors as well. But the sustainable model for the long-term sustainable model for criminal toxicology is, as Steve's mentioned, really dependent on that funding. So in light of the fact that we haven't received it, I wondered what other options should or could we be looking at, rather than the one that we think is the ideal, and is this an opportunity to reset? And in relation to that, I know that there is only, you know, we're relying on a single supplier for outsourcing this type of work. So is there an opportunity for us to work with procurement colleagues in terms of that supplier development? And I know this is a really technical, really specialist, highly capital intensive area. So I'm not underestimating the difficulties there. But I just think that it's incumbent on us to look at what are the alternatives given the current situation that we're facing.
Can I jump in and answer that question? Paul, do you mind?
Yeah.
So in relation to the options for what else we can do in the absence of funding, there really are very few. We need to invest in technology to grow the laboratory capacity. We are very clear, and we've gone through Resources Committee to show the options in terms of what the growth in capacity can and should look like. And we also have a good understanding of what the size and scale of the challenge is in terms of the amount of capacity that needs to be grown. Now, there's different discussions that we can have with Police Scotland colleagues and around what the enforcement strategy would look like in terms of tackling this problem, which is huge in terms of people driving on the roads of Scotland under the influence of drugs, which can vary from, which can range straight from that zero tolerance, which is where we've built the initial business case and where we are building the full business case around what it would take in terms of building the laboratory capacity to align with that. Now, there's an affordability question that needs to come in terms of what funding is going to be available to support that. Scottish Government have previously been very clear around a desire to have a zero tolerance approach to drug driving, but that will require investment. And I think we're very clear on what it would take from a forensic services perspective. And I think the pilots that are currently being undertaken under Opselton will give us a better indication of what additional funding is going to be required for Police Scotland to complement that laboratory capacity, so that we can look at what does zero tolerance look like for Scotland as it's in its entirety. So we are building that and doing that work at the moment. And then there's the art of what's possible and what's affordable in the current scheme of public sector funding. And I think that that's the conversation we are moving towards, given that unfortunately we did not secure the additional funding for the incremental rollout of Opselton across local policing as part of the budget settlement. We will need to look at what options we do have, but really there are very few. The internal capacity within the laboratory is well understood. We've more than doubled the internal capacity over the past 3 or 4 years through the work that we've done on the toxicology improvement plan, and we really are at a ceiling internally without additional investment in terms of what we can deliver. So I think we need to be pragmatic and realistic about what the art of the possible is in the absence of further funding. So I think, Angela, whilst it sounds a bit bleak, there aren't really very many options just now without further funding in terms of what we can do around further roadside testing and then the subsequent laboratory testing. With regards to the single supplier issue that you raised, Eurofins has an 85% market share of all analytical forensic science testing in England and Wales. It's a dominant provider. It's recently acquired Cellmark, which was the other big forensic science provider in England and Wales. That poses a range of risks for England and Wales policing in terms of the delivery of forensic science, and that's a key reason why they're looking very much at forensics reform down south at the moment. So in terms of the risks that poses to us, I think we understand those risks. We work very closely with our colleagues in Eurofins to make sure that we are managing that relationship and ensuring that the capacity is available that we can afford. But in the absence of some significant market reform, I don't think that there's too much that we can do in terms of diversifying that supplier base, if you like, in terms of outsourcing. We need to outsource within the United Kingdom, and Eurofins is pretty much the only option that we have, other than growing the internal capacity further, which brings me in a great big circle back to that we need the investment.
We do need the investment. That would be the ideal, and it does concern me that we have all our eggs in one basket through no fault of our own, but that's the way markets work, or don't work, so to speak. So I have a question regarding the 9 late samples from Police Scotland. Are we in any danger of time out, and what are Police Scotland going to do to make sure that those 9 become 0 in the future? Because we don't really want I don't see a good reason for samples being submitted late. So yes, now we've got Scott McCarran. Scott, over to you.
Hi, Chair. Yeah. So as you know, I started back at the end of last year. It's something we're looking at closely. Had a meeting with my team in the last number of weeks, and I know, as Paul extremely well explained, there is real close collaboration between us and forensic services. It's ultimately human error. When we look at the reasons for the late submissions, it's due to potentially the form not being submitted properly. If we look at December, where we've had a bit of a dip, there was actually an isolated reason there in terms of a new staff member, which we've addressed that training issue. So we do go through them in detail every month. There's also an issue if an officer clicks the wrong bit in the form, it won't show in our database, so we can't monitor it properly. So we're trying to address that, and as part of the meeting with my team yesterday, there's going to be further meetings with our colleagues in forensic services to see if we could perhaps be added to the email address when it's come back to the officer, so we can monitor it more closely than we already are. We're also looking at something to better automate some of it. So if we put in a crime code at some part of the system, it might then show it's a drugs issue, not a medical issue, which would then feed our database to again allow us to keep a good eye on it. Further to that, I've got an officer just become modified duty, so I'm dedicating this officer just now to be allocated to this to monitor it more closely than we have been already. And in terms of all the failures that we've had, we are emailing all the officers and their supervisors just to better understand exactly, for the reasons if they're not clear to us, why it was late, and we're putting out refresh guidance to all local policing divisions as well. So we're trying to do a number of things. We do recognise that target, but we're trying to do a number of things to address that.
No, that's really assuring to hear that activity going on there. And Fiona, and then I'll move to Mary.
Yeah, if I could just add to Scott's comments there, I think through the Operation Hitch improvement group, we look in detail at a lot of this activity, and it's really, I think we've reached a really important point in the discussions in that previously in conversation with HMICS, we've been concerned that there's some sort of systemic issue in and around the sample submission, and I think we know that that's not the case, and that's been quite a big leap forward. You know, the sample submission process is working well. The fact that 95% of the submissions are coming to the laboratory within the timescales that we need, and the way that the handoff, if you like, between Police Scotland and Forensic Services is working really effectively. And I think that's a testament to all of the work that has gone on through the Operation Hitch improvement group. What we now need to do is just focus in on those samples that come in where there's perhaps not quite all of the information that's needed, or there's an error in terms of the documentation, and we are never going to be able to have a perfect process because we've got people involved in that. So I think we're at the point where we just need to look at that rejection rate, so that sort of handoff between the laboratory back to Police Scotland if there's something missing in the documentation. But I think we can be really reassured that the sample submission process is effective. So whilst there's this small number that are sort of going back and forth, an extra step, if you like, the actual process itself is working well.
Good. And what's the danger of timeout? Is there any?
I think whenever we are working constantly to make sure if a sample comes in late that there's either restricted analysis that's undertaken on it so that we have a result within the timeframes that's required. We continue to work with Crown Office colleagues if we do get close to that time bar type scenario, then we work with the Crown Office to make sure that we can facilitate that as far as possible. So there's all sorts of catches within the system to make sure if it comes in late that we don't see cases that can't proceed to prosecution.
I get that, but are any of the 9 in danger of time bar?
Paul, do you have that detail?
So of the 9, no, I don't have that particular detail. I know there have been a couple of cases rejected because of the timescales. However, as Fiona has indicated, there is a system in place where we can ensure that we do that restricted analysis and provide that back. But there have been a couple of cases that have. Sorry, on you go, Chair.
What I want to know is how many are in danger of time bar. If you can't provide that information today, can you maybe get that and collect and circulate it around the committee?
I can provide them. Sorry, Fiona, I can provide that there are 2 cases that were outright rejected, and they passed back to Police Scotland just due to the nature. They were out with the 6-month timeline, the agreed terms and everything else. So there's that's all monitored in the 6 months.
But of the 9, it would be good to know how many of those are in danger of time bar, and
we do, just for your reassurance, Chair, we do have feedback on a monthly basis from the Crown Office of any cases that cannot proceed to prosecution as a result of any delay within that process. So all of those cases are reviewed on a monthly basis, and they're very few and far between.
Good to hear. Mary, and then I'll move the business on.
Thank you very much. Looking ahead to the development of the long-term sustainable model, and obviously that's the focus of a lot of attention, a lot of work, and the full business case will be influenced by the outcome of the pilot on the use of drug wipes at the roadside. So I wondered if there was a potential for us to have an update on how that pilot is going and how the rollout is likely to be taken forward, and what the implications would be for forensic services.
Yeah, I think we've got that in the action plan, Colette. Am I right? Is it May we're having something up?
That's correct, Chair. We're expecting an update to the May committee, but Scott McCarran might want to give a further update.
Yeah, if you can, Scott.
Thank you. It was covered in the action log, so there was indicative figures put forward at the last meeting what we thought local police officers may do, and that was in line with what road police officers have done. But we need to remember clearly that road police have been doing this for a number of years. They're really efficient at doing it, and it's a different level of demand in road policing compared to local policing. So it's less than what we anticipated. As you see for the report, it was 19 up to, I think it was the 14th of January, but that's been a wee spike and an increase since then. So we're up to 27 now between the subdivision in Ayrshire and the subdivision in Aberdeen. But it does remain under review. The pilot is still continuing until March, and then we'll come back, as was suggested, at the next board with a fuller update.
Great stuff.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Which sadly you won't see, Mary, because you have to tune in and join us online because you'll have demitted office by then.
I'll be most interested. I'll be your most avid listener.
I'm sure you will. Great. Thanks very much. If you can note the drug driving and the discussions surrounding this, and I'll move us on to item 3.5, which is financial monitoring report for Q3. And Fiona Douglas, you're going to introduce that.
Thank you, Chair. We've touched on elements of this as we've gone through the business already, so I'll be brief. So as I stated in my director's report, we are seeing an underspend of 1.1 million against the revenue budget, which is the forecast to year end. That represents just around about 2.3% of the overall forensic services budget, and I think I've articulated the reasons for that already in terms of the lower than expected staff numbers. There is a slight offset of the underspend with a slightly higher than expected non-pay costs, but we are looking at making sure that we've got plans in place to mitigate some of that underspend by year end. From a capital perspective, again, we've touched on this. We are anticipating coming in flat to budget at the 2.7 million, which also includes, if you recall, some of the investment in the capital replacement of our DNA technology. So we have all projects secured for delivery within the financial year. So we're in a good place with regards to the capital budget. And then from a reform perspective, again, the overall spend is forecast as flat in comparison with the previous forecast, which is slightly under budget for the year to date. I'm happy to take any questions.
That all seems very straightforward. Any questions for Fiona on this? Of course, this is Q3 and it's Q4 that you're basically trying to land on budget. So right, I'm not seeing any hands up, and I've not really got anything. It's as expected. We discussed this in other meetings with you. Okay, I'll move us then on to, if you bear with me, to item 4, which is Forensic Services Change Programme Update. We have Joanne Tierney here. Joanne, welcome this morning, and over to you.
Many thanks, Chair. I'll take the paper as read, but just take this opportunity to pull out a few highlights. Overall, the project is tracking amber against the refreshed programme roadmap, which is contained in Appendix A in the paper. Significant progress has been made across specific projects. However, we continue to navigate critical dependencies around the long-term sustainability project. In terms of the operating model, we remain on target for closure at the end of this financial year. As Fiona's alluded to, due to the financial constraints which resulted in us not receiving the full funding, we accept that some key elements of the op model will take longer to embed and come to life across the organisation. However, it's important that we move to project closure and allowing forensic services to take business plan. The op model delivery of our capability structure, the introduction of people and performance focused management level for our management structure, along with our partner focus roles such as our forensic operational leads role, provide a robust framework from which to move forward. End project reporting, lessons learned activity, and our gap analysis work will fully document what has and hasn't been delivered and the impact that the pace of delivery may have on our benefits realisation associated with those profiled for the op model project in the full business case. We've appreciated the support of our SMT colleagues recently within the project as we map out plans for the transition of key activity to the continuous improvement agenda within forensic services. In relation to the Forensic Services Core Operating Solution and Data Migration project, we were delighted with the positive feedback received from the Scottish Government Technical Assurance Framework Review. This was carried out by colleagues in the Scottish Government Digital Assurance team in October of 2025. The overall assessment was an amber green rating with a recommendation to the Scottish Government that the project could proceed to the procurement stage. We were specifically commended for the strong leadership within the programme and the extensive staff engagement activity which was undertaken as part of the requirement build for our core operating solution. The invitation to tender is now live in the marketplace with submissions expected by mid-February. We are confident that given the calibre of suppliers that have engaged with the procurement process to date, that delivered the tangible improvements in productivity, efficiency, timeliness, along with the providing a fit for purpose tool which will enable our people to do their jobs much more effectively. In terms of the long-term sustainable model, again, as Fiona has alluded to, a high-level timeline is being developed which indicates delivery milestones with an overall framework of a 4-year delivery schedule. This 4-year time frame is achievable, albeit ambitious. However, ongoing dialogue on the strategic direction for the policing response to drugs diving remains a critical dependency for the project. We also continue to engage with our estates colleagues in Police Scotland, working with the head of estates to explore opportunities within the overall Police Scotland Estates Master. Within the project, we continue to work to demand profiling as contained in the approved initial business case, which again, as Fiona's alluded to, is the zero tolerance approach. However, we're very much seeking to plan for a phased approach of delivering incremental capacity growth, which can respond flexibly as further clarity on actual demand modelling and funding opportunities become available. Finally, in relation to our centralised purchasing project, emphasis for this project is very much about identifying improvements and productivity improvements and potential for cashable savings through transformation of our current approach to purchasing activity. As is, mapping is now complete and key work streams have been identified. Staff engagement is now in progress, which will support the profiling of benefits and value add measures as outputs of this activity will be documented in a refreshed project brief prior to launch of the project proper in March. Happy to take any questions on the change paper.
Great. I'll just move to questions in a second. Could I maybe suggest, Joanne, you turn your camera off because your signal was breaking up throughout that. I got 95% of what you were saying. It's just with the questions, we need it probably to be 100%. So, great, thanks. Sorry about that, but it's just what it is. Any questions for Joanne? No, it's fairly succinctly put. Joanne, when do you reckon that we'll be able to get central purchasing back into green?
Sorry, I turned my camera on there. We're doing some scoping work and I'm working with my programme manager, Doug Nielsen, to see when we will have some project management support available from within our current cadre of change support from Police Scotland. We anticipate that should all things align, we'll be able to confirm the project management support for that later on in March.
So that project management March, but when do you reckon that we'll be able to see it, the actual project turning green?
Once we've had that resource confirmed. Okay, super.
So if we've got no questions for Joanne, I'll move on to the next item. We'll note that. The next item is item 5, Strategic Workforce Plan. We've had this up before. At the last committee, I think it was a draft of this. This is the one that we're looking to get approved, and we've got Sam Curran introducing that. So Sam, welcome, and over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Bearing in mind you've seen this before, I'll just canter through a brief introduction and hand back to you. So just to remind colleagues, the purpose of the Strategic Workforce Plan is to ensure that forensic services remains resilient to future demand and maintains an engaged, skilled workforce capable of meeting the needs of both our partners and the communities of Scotland. So this was very much a joint project. We worked with Skills for Justice, which Fiona alluded to in her director's report, but we also resourced it internally. And the important factor there is that we maintain this as a living document. Although you have the final draft to speak in front of you, we need to keep investing in this space, refreshing that document to make sure it serves our purposes moving forward. With regards to the approach we took, this was very much a structured approach. A number of interviews took place across the organisations involved. So we spoke to key people within forensic services, we spoke to key people within SPA corporate team, and of course we spoke to our key customers in Police Scotland and the Crown. The other very heavily involved area of the planning cycle was reviewing all the information and data we have available to us, and a heavy reliance on our performance data there. Probably the most interesting part for the readership is around the demand forecasting that was undertaken. So this was an extensive project, and we were well supported by our colleagues in Police Scotland, but in effect what we did was forecast the potential demand for crime groups 1 to 8 over the next 5 years, and then test those scenarios. Fiona again alluded to the conversion rates that these are based on. Again, there's some interesting reading within that, but we can look at that to move forward. With regards to the Strategic Workforce Plan itself, we have 5 key documents that have been prepared as part of this. First of all, a sizable chunky document, which you'll be pleased wasn't fully appendicised but is summarised in the plan, is the evidence base. So these are all the assumptions that the plan itself was based on. It makes for interesting reading. It considers both internal and external factors. Just to give some highlights, we assume population growth is going to be approximately 1.1% by the year 2040. It will be predominantly in urban areas, not rural. Degree attainment will remain high, and in Scotland it is looking really healthy in forensic science. However, we may see decreases within areas such as biology. But we are also considering internal factors, and the report pulls out the fact that we've seen a 10% increase in headcount since 2020, and that is aligned with our operational requirements. We also have very low leaver rate, around 3.9%, even lower than Police Scotland's, which we should celebrate in many senses, but equally it can hinder progression within the organisation and innovation from coming in from external areas. The other tools we have developed is the workforce planning tool itself, again summarised in the Strategic Workforce Plan. These in effect create heat maps of where resource may need to be invested in across different scenarios. We've worked with 4 scenarios for the time being: a baseline, which builds on that 5-year demand forecast, scenes recovering to historical averages, and we're seeing that move in the right direction already. Crime Group 1, so that's non-sexual crimes of violence, recovering to historical averages. That would be an increase in about 5% from 17 to 22%. And of course, the well-tested one around drug driving and the increase that we anticipate seeing there. The other things that we also have done is retirement and succession mapping. We're already putting this to use and have undertaken some activity around recruitment there to make sure that we don't lose the valuable resource when people head for retirement within our organisation. And also, following steer from the committee previously, we have costed the baseline scenario as well. So we have a full cost model there that will support us in our medium-term financial planning and also aligns closely with the best value recommendations that were previously made. Within the strategic workforce plan itself, we also have a set of actions and recommendations. These are categorized across 4 themes: workforce planning, evaluation, education and training, recruitment and retention, and workforce culture. There are a number in there. I don't intend on going through them, but they focus on things such as exploring opportunities for apprenticeships, improving succession planning, evaluating recruitment methods, etc. All valuable insight that we will look as an SLT to take forward in the months to come. The only thing I'll add, Chair, is we have also included as an appendix impact measures and outcomes that we hope to achieve from the strategic workforce plan and its implementation, and we will report that back to the committee in the format that works. I would suggest the annual performance report would be a good place to summarise our progress against the strategic workforce plan. So I'll stop there, Chair, and look forward to any questions.
Thanks very much for that, Sam. Questions from board members? Chris.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks very much, Sam. And as you say, we've discussed this before, and I really welcome this and look forward to approving it today. And welcome the approach that's been taken. I just wondered if you could say a little more about a couple of things. One is around the potential costing of the alternative scenarios, recognizing from previous discussions we've had that obviously that's only as possible as the data allows in terms of its robustness. But thinking back to Fiona's earlier comments on the contribution of medium-term financial planning to the strategic workforce plan. So anything more you wanted to say about that? And just on the impact on the measures and the outcomes, it's really helpful to see that, and obviously appreciate that will be something that you will refine over time. I guess a reflection I had was that the measures are primarily quantitative. Now, I can see the rationale for that in terms of a strategic workforce planning context, but I am interested in the contribution of qualitative measures in relation to outcomes and impact. Thanks.
Thanks, Chris. Sam.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for the questions, Chris. So with regards the costing, I'll take that one first. Actually, we can do this relatively easily now. I don't think we've got any of our SPA finance colleagues on the call, but in effect, the 4 scenarios that we've created, we could pick limitless scenarios moving forward. We just need to plug in our assumptions, and then we've got a tool, it's an Excel-based tool if we want to get specific, that allows us to flex that, and it will give us the answer out the other side that tells us what areas we may need future resource investment to be able to meet that potential scenario. That now links also to a costing model. So we're able to then look at the resourcing that's forecast, and then we'll get a estimated cost over the next 5 years, building in salary, on cost, etc., etc. So we will be able to do that, and we'll build that into, we need to keep refining those models as well, and we'll build it into the medium-term financial plan. With regards the impact measures and outcomes, I think that's a really good steer. So a lot of this comes down to culture as well. And in my opening sentence, I think I mentioned that we need to use this as a way to continue to improve our workplace culture. And we have other metrics and more qualitative that we'll need to use, such as the staff survey, etc., to monitor the impact of the strategic workforce plan as it's implemented. I think this also ties in really nicely with the work that Fiona and Paul Stewart are leading around culture more generally, and our hope is to showcase some of the work of the strategic workforce plan through some of the short life working groups that have been set up to drive improvements in workplace culture. But I see Fiona's also got her hand up, so I'll pause.
Yeah, Fiona, if you want to come in at this stage.
Yeah, thanks. And just to complement Sam's comments there, and particularly focusing on the costings part of your question, Chris, one of the things that the Strategic Workforce Plan doesn't comment on is productivity improvement. And I think that that's an area that we need to layer on top of the information and the costing model that Sam's described that sits within the work that we've done. So particularly going back to Joanne's report in relation to change, we have the core operating system is a critical product that is going to drive significant productivity improvements. So I think when we're looking at doing the medium-term financial planning as part of the best value response and the work more generally, what we need to look at is what the Strategic Workforce Plan is telling us, but then also layer on top of that other work which we know we've got ongoing in terms of areas where we can see a more efficient way of working that's going to improve productivity of staff. So there is another layer that sits above this, I think, that will then allow us to be able to determine what the financial planning element of it looks like. But I think what we have through the work that Sam and others have done and Skills for Justice have helped us with is to really have a tool that allows us to do it quite quickly because we can plug these numbers in and it's going to tell us a lot of information in terms of what the workforce mix needs to look like. But there is more information that needs to go into the financial plans around that. And just to completely agree with Sam's comments around culture and the qualitative information, I think it's really important that we capture those measures as well. Thank you.
Super. Angela.
Thank you. And it is great to see this report coming forward. I know it's been a long while in the making, so well done in getting it to this stage. Like others, it was the link between the investment that has been made in workforce and the outcomes for the organisation or the service. And you've covered it, Fiona. I think it's great that there will be a link eventually, but I think it is really important that the measures are quantifiable and we can see changes in Vicky's report in subsequent years that demonstrate just that investment is paying off. So that was a comment. But the other one was the role that digital plays. It's peppered throughout the document, and it just made me wonder whether or not our appetite to risk in that area is something that we need to revisit, or is it something that you're content with at this point in time? Should we be looking at our radical investment in digital to then help with productivity and performance, turnaround times and so on, or should we be satisfied? It's maybe for the risk paper, but it's maybe something that we need to consider at some point.
Great. Sam.
Thanks, Chair. Angela, I completely agree with you. I imagine Fiona may have some further views, but you're right, the Strategic Workforce Plan makes heavy reference to digital and the disruptive technologies that we're likely to see come onto the market, particularly AI. Personally, I think as a leadership team, we need to really take this seriously. So the plan is to look at all these actions and recommendations in more detail and think, how can we best take them forward? And it will, of course, inform the business plan moving forward as well. But we are working pretty closely with our colleagues in Police Scotland around the development of our digital and data strategy as well. And I will stop there because I imagine Fiona has the latest detail on that one. But if it supports our people and supports the communities of Scotland and ultimately our performance, I think it merits exploration as long as it provides value for the taxpayer at the end of the day. But I'll stop.
Okay, Fiona, I'll give you the last word, then I'll move for approval.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for your comments there, Sam. And Angela, I think with regards to seeing the outcome measures of investment, I think we've done a lot of work around benefits tracking through the introduction of the operating model. So we have got quite a good framework, I think, in place in terms of being able to map the impact of investment in terms of delivery. I think we could perhaps articulate that better for members, and I think we'll take that feedback on board. I think from a digital perspective, there is still more work to do with colleagues in digital division in Police Scotland. Clearly, that's a service back arrangement that we have. I mean, digital are constrained with the resources that they have available, and forensic services has to work within a prioritisation of all of the different demands on digital division across the policing. So there's a lot of fairly basic digital related activity that would make a difference. Just networking of instrumentation is a key one that we are always working towards, and we still have some big challenges, I think, in terms of the technology that's in place within forensic services and how we make sure that's safe and secure to sit within police networks and systems. It's something that seems so straightforward on the face of it, but the instrumentation that we purchase is so complex, and it comes from very niche suppliers, and that poses some really specific challenges for digital division colleagues in relation to that. We are developing a digital and data strategy, working very closely with Andrew Hendry in Police Scotland, so that we can really set out our ambition about how much digital technology could make a difference in forensic services. AI is absolutely an area where I think we need to look, and we need to work with colleagues outside of forensic services and policing, I think, in terms of how we can exploit AI related technology into forensic science. It's a common challenge across all the different jurisdictions, and it's an area that we've discussed as part of the Association of Forensic Science Providers, which is a body that looks across all the different laboratories and areas across the United Kingdom. So there's a lot more work to be done about digital, but you're absolutely spot on in terms of the impact that digital will have in terms of the future structure of the workforce. So it is, I think, a really important area that we need to dig into, and we need to get over some of the fear factor, whilst also making sure that we're maintaining public confidence in how we utilise new technology moving forward.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Fiona. I'm going to suggest that we move to approving this. Firstly, can I say that I think the process taken to developing the strategic workforce plan has been an exemplar, and I'd be grateful if you could share that experience, Fiona, with our partners, Police Scotland, to support their development of their strategic workforce plan. I think you've got a pretty good template for how to do it now. And the second thing I'm going to suggest is that we approve this, but with the caveat that we have an annual update on delivery and actions, and also that the now what's the formula? Words are going to scribble down. Bear with me. Yeah, we get an annual update on delivery and action set out within the current iteration and of the strategic workforce plan. It should be also subject to annual review with presentation to committee. Are you happy with that, everyone? I don't think that presents management with any particular problems, but I think getting it reviewed annually and bringing it to us would be good, plus also how it's being implemented. Okay, with that, I'll move us then on to the next agenda item, which is committee effectiveness. And we have Karen Valance from the SPA come to take us through that. Good morning, Karen, how are you?
Good morning, Chair, thank you. The committee effectiveness process is an important part of our commitment to strengthen and improve our governance. The annual self-assessment process allows us to consider how the committee is performing against its terms of reference. This informs committee development, member development, and also the committee work plans. It also informs the overall certificate of assurance process, which is required to be submitted to the Audit, Risk and Assurance Committee as part of the annual audit and reporting process. This year, we again asked stakeholders for their views, and the number of overall responses to the survey have doubled compared to last year, which is really positive. 4 of those responses were specific to the Forensic Services Committee. Overall, the results from members and stakeholders are generally positive, with few areas of concern being raised or areas identified where improvement can be made. I just want to finish by thanking SPA colleagues for their contribution in collating and presenting the analysis in the report. And the ask of the committee today is to discuss the results and confirm whether you're satisfied that the committee has discharged its terms of reference for the 2025-26 period to date. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much for that. I'm going to throw this open to members because this is for discussion. Any thoughts or comments on this? No, we've kind of expressed it in the questionnaires, I suppose. It's not. It is what it is. It's not a negative report by any manner of means. There's one or two little bits that aren't maybe as effusive as last year, but that's the nature of the beast. I'm conscious there was something about the chair needs to bring in partners more, which I've singularly failed to do today. But not to worry, I'll be cognizant of that going forward. It's a tricky one because it's not always what's the word I'm looking for, pertinent. It's not like the People Committee where you've got the union sitting there and they've got a particular locus there. It's not always, for example, in the change programme, someone from the Crown Office is unlikely to have an opinion on that. So it's a bit more problematic, but it is something I will bear in mind. The quality of reporting, I think, generally has got better and better. And there's, incremental changes as we've gone on. There's been a lot of heavy lifting that's taken place this is my perspective here, has taken place in the past. And similarly with the quality of performance reporting as well, which, we've taken big steps in about 3 years ago or something to improve that. And every year now it's incremental stuff. And I think that's part of discussions we've had before. I also think we're quite lucky because I think forensics in terms of performance is a relatively straightforward factual thing, whereas a lot of other policing committees are, they're more difficult, more abstract is the wrong word to put, but you know what I mean. This is scientifically based, so there's very good stats in virtually everything. So, but anyway, that's my thoughts on it. Does anyone have anything they want to flag up at this, or shall we just note this? Does this go on to the board, doesn't it?
So all the reports come to the May Audit, Risk and Assurance Committee. So
Right.
These will all come to each individual committee over February and March, and then on to ARAC in May.
Yeah. Okay, I've got Chris and Fiona. I'll go to Chris first and then Fiona.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And I would endorse your remarks, and obviously, as you say, in a sense, we've expressed our views through the survey itself, so that they're there for all to see in totality. There is a point there. It's a small point around overlap and duplication and managing that effectively. I fully put my hands up and say that was me. I think what I would say, just in respect of that, however, is that I do recognise that that's a two-way street. So that is for forensic services management in terms of the reports they bring us, but it's also up to us in terms of how we manage our scrutiny within meetings. So effective scrutiny is a two-way street, and we have our role to play in that. So, but I would endorse your comments, Chair, about the overall improvement in direction, despite some kind of very minor wrinkles there in terms of there is always going to be those vagaries, aren't there? But it's positive. Absolutely. I think rightly so.
Yeah, I myself and some of the other ones, it's 1 year I'll do it on a good day when I'm feeling bright and positive about the world, and the next year I might not be quite so. And actually, the actuality is things do improve. It's just maybe not my temperament that week. So anyway, Fiona Douglas, and then I'll move the business on.
Thank you, Chair. And I think we all hope that you're having a good day when you do the Forensic Services Committee. Yes. But no, I just wanted to pass on my thanks to Colette and Karen and the team in terms of how they work with us, in terms of the coordination of the documentation which we provide to members to support your effective scrutiny of forensic services. I think they do a brilliant job. And my only other comment I wanted to make was really a request that we consider when we review the terms of references of the Forensic Services Committee moving forward, that we perhaps consider expanding the terms of reference so it looks at forensic science more broadly rather than focused entirely on forensic science that's undertaken in forensic services. Thank you.
Great. No, thanks for that. I think that's a point well made. Super. Okay, if we note this, then we have the workforce plan, item 7, if we can note that. I don't think there's anything additional that we're adding to that. And then that moves us on to the private business. So I'm going to ask that the broadcast be halted.